I thought it would be fun to show you how I create these very ethereal looking images, and I essentially don't really do any skin retouching. I do like move a little bit of, if there's darker splotches and stuff like that, but I don't do any skin smoothing or anything. I think the magic all is in how I manipulate the background and highlight the highlights. So let's come into the shoot and I'm going to show you how to do this. I think it took me 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. But I just love them. I think they're so pretty and ethereal. And this model is based near Vancouver, BC. And she's an Irish lass and she's so much fun to work with. She's definitely my kind of style of a model. I work with a lot of girls, or have worked with a lot of girls in the past, that essentially end up either not liking what I do, or they're more into the Instagram-y kind of feel where they're influencers or something. So, locally I struggle to find people that like to do what I do. And so I think from now on, I'm not going to sacrifice my time on people that don't appreciate what I do. I'm getting too old for that. But let's just show you what I do really quickly with these because I think they're super fun. You can see that I had done all of these adjustments in Lightroom. I'm just going to open this up in Photoshop, and really quickly, I'll explain to you a couple things that I like to do just to, again, put the focus more on our subject and less on the distractions in the environment. So if you take a look over here, this tree looks like it potentially could be growing out of her head. I don't like this big white blobby sky because it's definitely drawing your eye to it. Her leg, because she was on her knees, is very distracting. So I'm going to remove her leg. And then essentially the rest of it is not difficult. So let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and flatten this. And I'm just going to duplicate this layer, and I'm just going to go ahead and select my subject this way. Now, this I find easier than masking in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom specifically, because then I can manipulate it with my lasso tool. So let's zoom in, and I always zoom in because I want to make sure that my masking is accurate, and with AI doing it now, it's pretty darn good. I don't usually have a lot to complain about, but I am going to deselect this leg because we don't want it. And how did I do that? I just hold my Alt Option key when I'm on my lasso tool, and then I can deselect. If you want to increase your mask, let's say if I wanted to add in something, then you hold down your Shift key like this, and it'll add it, which is super easy. And even for this, we're probably going to just maybe do a tiny bit. It's not really necessary, but just to show you. Okay, and then all I do is just bingo bambo, add a mask like this. Now, if I click on my mask and I go to my properties, you can find your properties under window right there. And I just keep my properties kind of pinned up here next to my actions and what have you. I'm going to feather this mask a little bit. It just helps with the transition. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is put a blank layer between these two. And I'm going to grab a brush. Now, the brush set that I'm using is my No Tools. Okay, paintbrushes, No Tools. And these have no tools applied to them. And for those of you that were a part of the Photoshop Creativity Summit, you'll be familiar with this because you got this set. If not, it is available in my store. But all of these knives can be used for painting, can be used with a pattern stamp tool, and there's no tool applied. So it doesn't mean that, oh, well, it's only a brush or it's only a mixer. So these are available to use for anything. So I'm going to use my pattern 14 brush, which is this one. And all I do is I start sampling like a darker color that I want to go over top. I'm using 100% right now. I will change that, but I do continuously just sample various colors so that I get a little bit of a range. Now, typically I will start with darker colors and build on it because I like to use, most of the methodology for painting, whether that's traditional or digital. You always start with a darker base and then build upon it from there. So this is what I'm doing. And now this brush does have a wee bit of texture in it, which is fine because you can't really tell from this kind of a distance. And now you see how if I start using a lighter color over top of those darker colors, I'm going to reduce my flow. And because I don't want to undo all of the hard work that I've already just done. And this one, again, is dark, so we're going to bump it back up to 100. And when you do this, you can just tell by looking at the image which areas of this set image are drawing your eye to them, because that's essentially what you want to do. You want to take all of that distraction away from your eye. So I always start with my background. That's just how I do things. Always start, because for me, I'm not ready to focus on my subject until all of the environmental distractions are gone. And if I look over here, this darkness here is a little distracting now that we've pretty much gotten rid of most of that lightness. And if we want to come behind her now, because we've masked her off, it's super easy to do, because right there, that's a distraction. So you want to come in and you want to just so gently tap away any kind of distractions. So like these little dark blobby things, distractions. And we're just adding this really kind of bright, pretty light green now to the edges, because there's quite a bit of sunlight hitting her. So there would be quite a bit of highlights hitting her, hitting the background as well. So we're just kind of coming in, and you can see how blown out the highlights are on her hair, which I happen to love. And so I'm going to make sure that around her hair there, we don't want lines going through her head either. Anytime you have a horizon line going through a subject's head, you probably need to get rid of it. But we're just going to add these bright highlights just around her like so. And we're just adding these lovely little light greenish yellow highlights to the area like that. You could probably add a little bit up in here. And you see how now that really does end up looking like leaves on a tree, which is okay. It's not bad. You don't necessarily want this line to be there because you don't want it to look like there's a tree growing out of her head. So you might sample that one and just kind of minimize it like so. And sample over here and just minimize the fact that that was a tree over there. And now we can just kind of turn it into perhaps a bush or hedges or something like that. And then come back down with your lighter green and just add some in like this. And I'm going to reduce that flow again because it's a little too strong for what we're trying to do. So something like this, and again, a little bit over here because I can see that that is a dark spot that could potentially distract your eye. And all of this is just personal preference, of course. You can do it any way you want. This is just how I do it. And this is just a really fun way to be able to add a little bit of interest to your image. I think it's a totally different way than most people do it. Most of the things I do is pretty different from how most people do things. And if you're interested in learning more creative ways to manipulate your photos or digital art, feel free to join my platform. The link is in the description. So now I do like this. I'm just going to add a little bit more in here. Like this. And this is just going to kind of add to giving the illusion of leaves kind of glistening in the wind here as well. So hopefully you're understanding what I'm talking about when it comes to distractions. Like this red, no, we don't want red. Why would we want red? And I don't even remember what that was. I shot this over the summer. And yeah, I don't really remember exactly what that was. But that's okay. I'm going to go a little lighter here and just come in around her hair. But do you see how there's not quite enough yellow-green in that? And it's starting to give off a little bit of a blue look. That's definitely not something that we want. So perhaps I'll just undo that a little bit and go a little bit brighter just in here. So now for the most part, I think we have gotten rid of the majority of the distractions, right? And anytime if you see a spot that's perhaps a little bit too bright in here, then for sure you're going to just come back in with a darker brush and just go over that oh so gently. And the beauty is once you get rid of, perhaps all of these distractions, then you can actually globally affect it so much better. And also this leg here. So what I think we're going to do is we're just going to grab our stamp tool and I'm just going to kind of just come over here and look at cloning it out by just sampling other areas of the picture. And the reason for that is because now it looks like she's just kind of in this area and not really have a leg sticking out, which I think just works better for this overall look, right? And okay, so if I zoom in now, what do we see? Well, we see all the texture of this. You have two options. You can add a little bit of blur to it so that those textures aren't so sharp. And all you do is just go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And you're seeing that at 7.6, I think that is soft enough. I'm just going to click OK. But look at the masking for her hair. Well, what you do is you put a layer above, Alt Option to clip it. And I'm just going to use a regular blend mode and I'm going to sample this color right here. And I'm just going to go over top of the darker part of that masking with this white, and that's just going to help me really quickly get rid of that nasty kind of effect that happens occasionally with masking. You could come down and actually lighten up all these flyaways because we're going to add some really pretty highlights in kind of a glowy way to this. I think that just adding the white highlights to the very, very edges actually works for this technique. Okay, so that's that. And essentially, that's how I would fix the background. And then what you can do is go back underneath your subject, go to adjustment layers, go to curves, and you're just gonna, don't go right to the midtones, maybe just a little bit left of it. If you wanted to perhaps make her pop out even more, you're just gonna add a little bit of drama by pulling that curve down like that. I'm not going to make an S curve because I don't want it to be too contrasty, right? And that's basically how I would affect that. You can also come in and go to your selective color and maybe go to your yellows because this is lime green, so it's going to be definitely more yellow. And you can see if I pull my greens into the magentas, I bring a little bit of interest and warmth to this. You could try adding some blue. It's going to make it less vibrant. So I wouldn't do too much because I kind of like that contrasty look right there. But I do feel like that magenta has kind of married in a lot of the tones that she has in her skin, right? So that's all we've done so far. And that's pretty much good enough as far as just the whole look of this. So now all I'm going to do is go ahead and flatten this and I'm going to duplicate it and I'm just going to focus on her face because I remember from the other edits that I've done, there is a little bit of blotchy in her face. And by blotchy, I'm just talking about here, a little bit of that. So all I do for this is just really quickly a dodge burn. Go to my dodge on a soft brush at literally 1% flow, and just make sure that I have a regular soft brush for this. And I wouldn't recommend zooming out too far when you do this, because you want to be able to see where the blotches are. And she's just, she's an Irish gal, so she's got those really kind of ruddy red cheeks. So this is really the only retouching that I'm going to do on her face. I feel like these images that are shot with predominantly the sun behind them, right? So the majority of the light is behind and above her. I think these are gorgeous. I don't typically use any full flash for these because I feel, in my opinion, just, what I like. I love the drama that this dynamic lighting offers for this type of ethereal, kind of magical, fantasy-ish portrait, right? Again, just see these little darker, blotchy spots. That's all we're looking at. And you don't have to get down into the minutia and, retouch like Pratik or anything for this, because you don't want this to be a supermodel, perfect skin type of image anyway. And the whole point of this is to make sure that you get it done quick, and that way you can just, not spend your whole life sitting at the computer doing crazy edit, That's all you do. So yeah, just get rid of a couple of those darker areas that might distract you. And then the same thing with burn, right? So if we look over here, probably be nice to kind of burn this little area in here, and any kind of areas that look like perhaps they should have a little bit of darkening to them. So if you're into any kind of fantasy or ethereal type portraits, then this is going to be pretty handy for you at this rate. But see all these highlights and stuff? I love them. Like, I know a lot of people don't, but I'm not exactly a rule follower. I don't care about these hairs. I don't care about these hairs. Don't care, because the end result of this is going to be so pretty. So I'm just going to go ahead and flatten it. I am going to grab my remove tool really quick and just take the attention away from this little neckline and this little neckline. And that's essentially it. And this one. Because the whole point of these images, honestly, they're to be viewed from far away. They're not really, super close-up version like this. Okay, so what's next? Well, essentially our retouching on her is pretty much done. So the next thing that I would do is a couple of curves adjustments using Blendif. So let's go to our curves. And we're going to do another kind of deepening, darkening of the darker areas like this. But you can see I'm not going very much. Now I'm just going to double click on it, and I want to keep the highlights. So I'm going to go like this, which keeps our highlights. And you can see once this mask, you can see where it's affecting when I pull this to the left. So what are the areas that I want to maintain? Well, in the hair. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option and just split that apart so that it's a softer transition, something like that. Click on my mask and then Command I to invert it. And now I just grab a soft brush and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to paint that kind of contrast on to these particular areas around here, because when we are just about finished, you're going to end up wanting that contrast back. So even probably in here, this could use a little bit more contrast here, and maybe even up in this corner here. And then don't forget to feather. So the next one is another curves adjustment. This time we're going to focus on brightening some of our highlights. So this is substantially brighter. We're going to double click, and this time we're going to pull our shadows to the right, exposing just the highlight area that we want to affect. So I pull this right to about there, hold my Alt or Option key and split apart. And if you zoom in, you can see exactly what part we're affecting and how much you want that to be. So something like that is cool. And now we're just going to invert that again, Command I. And then same thing, you're just going to go ahead and kind of paint those highlights, maybe a little bit more on her hair here, maybe a bit there. I love the highlight on her hands. I think it's beautiful. It's kind of reflecting from down here where the sun was hitting her directly, and maybe just a little bit on her face right here. But that's essentially it. I mean, you could add a little bit in here because I know there's going to be a little bit. It just depends on what you want. Okay? Feather that out. So the next thing I do is I go to my filter, exposure software. I have been using this for 150 years. I still use it, still love it. And this is essentially the last filter that I use. So that's before and that's after. And I do love it. Which one is it? This one is Fuji Pro 400H, which is this one. And what I might do though is come down to my yellows and just drop those yellows a little bit. And might pull up the orange a little bit. I like the orange on her hair. I'm not a huge fan of the orange on her face. So we'll reduce that a little bit. Now you can see the red on her fingers, but all that is as it should be. I've reduced the yellows now because up here I feel like it's just way too bright. If we keep it like that and change it to a little bit warmer hue, something like that I think is fine. And I don't have any sharpening on her. And the reason for that is because I find that when you do masking, it creates like black, yucky, contrasty lines. I have no grain on this. I do have a wee bit of a light vignette. So you could opt to make it a little bit lighter, or you could opt to make it a little bit darker. It's just personal preference. So I'm going to make this one darker. Click apply. I'm not digging how red this area looks right here. I think what I'm going to do is come into my hue saturation, and I believe that's red, so let's just check. Yeah, that's red. So we can just kind of reduce that, add a little bit more yellow to it. Go ahead and Command I to invert that. And then you can just, oh, so easily adjust that like this. Okay, so that just fixed all of that. And if we take a look at her cheek, this is usually when the blotchiness shows up in her cheek. And I think there's a little tiny bit there, but really for this image, do we really care? Not completely really. So this is our color change. This is our lovely exposure change, and I love all of this. So go ahead and flatten it, and I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to rename this layer background because we are going to run my bloom action. So the bloom effect is a fun action that I created specifically for really super bright highlights like this. But you have to name your duplicated layer background or it will not work. Now, I believe I have this in my store. I know on my platform it's a freebie in the school section, but by the time I post this, I'll make sure that I do have it in my store and have it up there for any of you that might be interested. So all you do is click play. When this pops up, depending on how bright your highlights are, these highlights are very bright, I'm going to pull it down a bit. I'm going to click OK. And then it's going to pop up the color. What color do you want your rim light around your subject to be? So this is like gold, which is fine. I'm going to make it brighter though, right about here. And I'm going to pull that saturation down because I don't want it to be that crazy. And then you click OK. And then there's your glow or bloom. Okay. And what I typically do is go down to my fill. And I reduce it until it looks all glowy and pretty. So that's before and that's after. All right. Now, you could add a mask to this and just brush it off. But what I tend to do is I just come in and I grab my selective color, go to my blacks, and I pull that down, invert it, and then I just paint it back on her. That's just how I do it. But this will just give you a little bit more of that contrast back. And you can come in around her hair too, just to get that difference between the two, which I think is cool. So that's before and after. It just brings it back. And then color toning and we're done. Selective color, I always start in my blacks. I'm going to add some red because I think it's going to go quite well with the overall feel of this image. Go to my neutrals. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow and a little bit more red. And maybe pull that down just a bit, like a +2. Go to my yellows or my whites, and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. You can try adding maybe a little bit of magenta or even cyan. Cyan is really pretty for these ones. And pull your whites down just a bit, depending on what you want. And that's it, guys. So super quick, super easy, and then you're left with something that is oh so pretty and dreamy. So until the next video, I'll see you then.